Welcome to eDiscovery Leaders Live, where I get a chance to chat with luminaries in eDiscovery and related areas. This broadcast is sponsored by Reveal-Brainspace, the industry's leading AI eDiscovery platform. Don't forget to subscribe to watch me, George Socha, weekly with leaders in eDiscovery. Thank you for tuning in. Welcome to eDiscovery Leaders Live, hosted by ACEDS and sponsored by Reveal. I am George Socha, Senior Vice President of Brand Awareness at Reveal. Each Friday morning at 11 a.m. Eastern, I host an episode of eDiscovery Leaders Live, where I get the chance to chat with luminaries in eDiscovery and related areas. Past episodes are available on the Reveal website. Go to revealdata.com, select Resources, then select eDiscovery Leaders Live. My guest this week is one of my colleagues, Bilyan Belchev. Billy is Director of Product, AI Analytics at Reveal. Before taking on that role, he was President of WebATEX and as well an adjunct at the Illinois Institute of Technology. Billy, welcome.
Thank you, George. So glad to be here.
Glad to have you. What I would like to start with is a bit about your background. How did you get into what you're doing? What is it that you do anyway? So let's roll. Let's hear your history.
Sure. It's always fun to talk about oneself, right? I came at Reveal about a year ago full time, but I had been working with teams at Reveal for several years, and then teams at AI teams, data science teams with companies that Reveal acquired for even longer than that, about 5 years. And my passion really and my background has a lot to do with finding the most efficient way to serve users' need when it comes to software, when it comes to achieving a workflow with digital tools. So optimizing, making it easy. It's that easy button that we'll look to reach. And I see myself as a facilitator in fighting to reach that button. I have worked in this role, as I said, for a year, but before that, my role was directing a team of designers and developers to produce digital tools, again, web-based applications, mobile applications, software, in a few different industries, eDiscovery being one of them. I might say one of the most interesting and challenging industries, a space where there's lots of opportunity and exciting innovation happening. So my drive has always been find a painful, difficult workflow and make it a little better, a lot better, and lead the team, the designers, the developers that I have the pleasure of working with to make it better, to optimize it, to make it easier.
What took you to this area in the first place? Not eDiscovery, but the web development and user.
Sure. You know, I went to school for computer science, so in my early dreams, I was going to be a developer. I was going to be an engineer, a programmer, and I did finish an engineering program in computer science. But truth be told, as I was finishing that program, I found sort of the daily job responsibilities of the engineer to be not exactly up my alley. It was a little more repetitive and a little more of the same. Now, if any of my team members here hear this, I worry what they might think. But it's about fit and passion. And I think some of that was not. And I happened to walk in a presentation at the Illinois Institute of Technology. It was a conference going on. And I happened to walk in on a presentation where a team of developers was presenting the results of a usability study. So they were doing a study of a banking website. This is the early 2000s. Um, they were doing a banking study where online banking was becoming a much more prevalent feature. And they had taken screen recordings, eye tracking movement recordings to figure out user flows, user paths, where people get lost on the website, what is easy, what is hard to do on the website, and then made changes to it based on the results of that study. And it fascinated me. It was exciting. It was interesting. It was at that juncture between working with people, solving problems that engineers love to solve problems, but in an area that was slightly more varied than code. So I decided this is what I wanted to do. I found a lab. The Illinois Institute of Technology has a lab where they perform those studies with one-way mirrors and cameras that track eye movements, exciting things. And I spoke to the director of that lab and that professor, and I said, look, I don't know what major I have to be in, but I want to do this. It's interesting. And long story short, I ended up enrolling in a graduate program. I ended up taking a lot of usability courses and related materials. I ended up being first a teaching assistant, then an assistant in that lab, working with some clients. And ever since, I've enjoyed that juncture of working with the engineers and the clients at the same time. So to make it a little bit shorter, from that lab, I found a opportunity to work in software development, app development here in Chicago. I ended up joining a firm that I ended up owning. That firm became a vendor consultant to NextLP, then Reveal, and Reveal acquired that firm. And I've had the pleasure of being able to continue that relationship with customers, frontline, people trying to solve problems, and connecting with the engineers that build the tools that solve the problems.
You mentioned earlier on in the discussion that you've worked with folks in a variety of industries, e-discovery, one of the most challenging. What has made e-discovery challenging?
I say that because just the scale of the problems that I've seen is unlike a lot of other industries. When I say scale, that could refer to simply the volume of data. It could also mean the time pressure, the immense time pressure. It could be factors like what does a minute of effort cost in an industry? And we know that a minute in this industry is is expensive, correct? So I find that that's what I was referring to as challenge. The variety of cases, of data types, of workflows, of scenarios. There's no two cases or no two teams that approach a case in the same way. That's another challenge of scale, in my opinion. And at the same time, I think that all those challenges are opportunities for innovation, opportunities for solving problems. As I said, engineers thrive on one thing, that's solving problems. So they're looking for problems. They cannot work well in an environment that's perfect. And thankfully, there's very few of those perfect environments. So
At Reveal, where you are now, what are those challenges, those problems that you are trying to solve? What is it you're doing from day to day?
at the most basic of it, I do that connector role between the engineering team and the customers. It was popular a few years ago. A phrase about the empty chair in a room became common in startups and in software companies. The idea was that as engineers were meeting, they would reserve an empty chair. That would be the empty chair for the customer, and then keep the customer in mind. Well, I like to think of myself as someone who occasionally or often tries to sit in that chair. So it's no longer empty. Now, mind you, I'm not as good as a customer. And when we get the opportunity to, we do actually sit a customer in that chair, get them to talk to some of my colleagues on the product team, some of my colleagues in the engineering teams. But really, it's not an empty chair, or should never be an empty chair. I bring the concerns, requests, desires, challenges of our customers to my colleagues, to the engineering team. And I do that by prioritizing the feature requests and the functions that will go into the next release of one of our products, especially those powered by artificial intelligence.
What you're doing, though, isn't just behind the scenes work. It's also work on what the interface itself looks like, right?
Absolutely. So I do get a part in getting to design the look and feel, getting to design the workflow of a feature, getting to give an opinion. It might sound small or trivial to say, what if the save button on a document viewer in review was 2 inches closer or 200 pixels closer, right? How long does it take to move your mouse 2 inches, give or take? Well, when you multiply that by 100 reviewers times 1,000 documents times many days in many cases, it really adds up. So I get to be in the room when we design the placement of that button. That's a small example. Or a very cool, new, exciting visualization that might help bring more insight into a big data set, find anomalies or patterns into a big data set. So it's actually very exciting, and it really hits the spot in that variety that I spoke about having missed when I was working on coding alone. I get that visual connection as well.
So one of the challenges I see you having to tackle or take on is that it's one thing to set out a set of requirements. The platform must be able to do this. The platform must be able to do that. It must tee up information as a result of a search, or it must let you perform a search. It's a very different thing, and I think a much more complicated thing to figure out how do you present all of that to the user? How do you develop an interface that lets them search more easily and more effectively? How do you develop an interface that tees up information in ways that they can consume and understand it better? And that's very much what you're doing, isn't it?
It is absolutely, George, and I'm grateful for you having expressed it so clearly. It is a big challenge. It is a big challenge, and I have to start by giving credit to two things that have nothing to do with me. In solving that challenge, I work with an incredibly talented team of interface designers, people that are very experienced and passionate about visualizing information, about finding simple ways to represent complex relationships on one hand. And on the other hand, I work with within an organization that's passionate about bringing ideas to customers and getting direct feedback from them, treating the customer as a partner, almost a co-designer in a certain sense, for an exciting new feature. So I'm happy to be part of those processes and conversations, but I take no credit for their existence. I'm just excited to be in them.
In those situations where you get a chance not to try to put yourself in the empty chair, but actually have the client there, what are those experiences like? What do you bring to that, and what do you develop out of that?
Sure. I learned early on a little secret. Every time I talk to a client, I have to be careful of how I phrase my questions in order to get the most value and communicate the right expectations. So the wrong questions to ask a customer will be, what do you want? Because you get a whole list of desires and requests and ideas, but you have no way to judge whether those are how to prioritize those, how much are real, how much are important, how much are really necessary in a case. So the question I always try to find out is, what do you need? Now, you couldn't ask it directly. So I found a simple solution to that. And it's about, show me what you do today on a certain task and point me anytime you reach a pain point, you find a pain point. So it's a simple question of, pretend I'm an apprentice. You're going to be training me to help you for a day or two, and you're showing me how you do what you do today. And anytime you find a complex, confusing, unusual piece of it, just highlight it for me. Now, to me, that is an answer, begins to form the answer of what I need. Oh, when we import a complex set of data, we find dates that are in different time zones. And let me tell you, it's very difficult to normalize that data. Or we get these static images and I can't read the text in them. So it's painful to do a search because they don't come up in a search unless I complete optical character recognition. And in those conversations, the needs start to emerge. So it was a bit of a long answer, but I shared my secret. I just sit and listen and observe and probe with questions about those pain points. They are the most revealing way to identify needs and therefore opportunities that a tool, a software tool, a software platform could address or help alleviate at the least.
As much as you're an engineer in this process, you're also an artist. How does that part of it work?
There is a challenge. So an engineer or designer will have an uncontrollable instinct to jump to solutions right away. So when you see somebody struggle with a particular workflow in a tool, your first instinct will be to think of a solution right away. And that solution, maybe the quickest solution, would be something you reach. So the art versus the science part that I try to find is control my instinct to think of immediately, oh, if you just move this button here, or add 2 more menus on this side, or make this visualization histogram instead of a line chart, will solve it. So training myself to listen, pause, capture the artistic instinct, but save it for the day after is how I found that balance, or how I try to look for that balance. And then I try to do the same for my team, the teams I work with. As we discuss something, it is that same instinct. Oh, here's a solution. 2 minutes, done. Get a story in our software tracking tool. I'll have it done in a day, in a week, and the problem is solved. So I have to challenge them to think a little bit bigger picture and thinking if it fits in a few more cases, use cases and scenarios.
You mentioned get a story. What do you mean by that?
Yes, it's a little bit about how the sausage is made in terms of software. We use a agile software development method here at Reveal, and every feature request before it makes it into the product, way before it makes it into a product, it starts as a simple story in a software tool, a user story that has to talk about the value. So as a review manager, I would like to see a report of how accurate my reviewers were so that I can evaluate who are making the cut. Let's just say that's the story. And it really has to be textbook. The textbook on this says it has to be a sentence or two, nothing more. So every feature has to have the why. It's not about the what, but the why. So that's how we track, and everything starts in as a little entry in our tool that the engineers will go through with my assistants and my designers, refining, prototyping, putting in a lot more definition after that sentence, but it really is about what value are we bringing to whom, to which of our users and roles that we try to serve. And again, I have to be, it's my first and foremost responsibility to make sure that that is a truly valuable, useful feature based on feedback from our customers and from a lot of our internal stakeholders who interact with our customers too, support, or sales, or people who go to a lot of industry events or have a lot of industry experience. They all have a role to play in defining value and defining priority. I have to take all of that and decide between feature A and feature B, what makes it in first. Maybe all of them will make it some point, of what makes it in first.
So, not to be glib, but it sounds like you not only need to be an engineer, you not only need to be an artist, but you need to be not an author of epic novels, but rather a poet of a very short poems, each story being a very short poem that captures the essence of something you're trying to accomplish, and then you go from there.
It is true, and you can tell by my answers. A skill I need to still work on is brevity in my stories. But it's true.
Yeah. Now, you're not doing all of this all by yourself. You've got a team working with and under you. What's the complexion of that team? What do they look like?
Absolutely, by no means it's just myself. So I'm part of the product team. There is 5 of us, or 6 of us soon. About half of us focus more on that product ownership role, which is directly working with the engineers to define the story, explain the story, communicate the priority. And another half of or another several on the team are really experienced user interface designers, data visualization experts, sort of help put an idea and explanation into pixels, into beautiful prototypes, into workflows, and so it is definitely a collaboration. And our team exists to serve and work with the engineers on a not only daily basis, but on an average day, I probably have 7 to 10 interactions with engineers in support of answering questions and deciding what's next and deciding if what we did was meeting the definition of what we wanted and so on and so forth. So I feel like we're in a role to serve our customers and our engineers.
You know, when I was at a law firm, we would have discussions about where lawyers fit. Were these lawyers who were facing and interacting with the clients on a regular basis? Were we a large enough firm that we could afford to have those lawyers who figuratively sat away in the back room and labored away on something, but clients never actually met them face to face? The role you're describing doesn't sound like that latter. It sounds like you spend not only a lot of time with folks internal within the organization, but time with the clients of Reveal as well.
Absolutely. And there's part A, I like that part a lot. I enjoy that. But part B, it's absolutely necessary. If I am to understand the needs and help use that understanding to prioritize the features, the roadmap of a product, I need that firsthand input and exposure with our customers. And they need an opportunity to express that. So I would be part of quarterly calls with a customer, client meetings, even some industry conferences, not to give a speech, but to be there and listen for their feedback. I was recently had the pleasure of attending Legal Week, where Reveal introduced Reveal 11, a big unveiling. And a lot of my role was stand. There's no chairs at booths, as you know. Stand by the booth, listen to the demos, listen to the feedback, answer questions, but really carefully observe and have my ear open to what is their reaction, what are their questions, what are their concerns. And that exposure, standing right next to them, is tremendous for a product team in order to understand what needs addressed next, what needs worked on next, based on real input. I work with a lot of data scientists. We have a lot of data scientists here at Reveal. So they talk all about data-driven decisions. And my data might not be as voluminous or as structured, but my data has to be based on customer input and customer feedback relating to a real case, a real scenario. Going back to not what I want, I'd like a blue background versus a green background. Oh, we worked on this case. This is where we had the most challenge. This is where we spend the most time. Light bulb goes off. Maybe we can do something about it in the next release or a release from that.
You must. I can't imagine that it's a situation where you just field a request, put together a response to that request, if you will, and you're done. You're not one and done ever, are you? It's always an iterative process with multiple cycles, I would think.
Oh, you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. And taking maybe the life cycle of a new feature, especially maybe a bigger feature, it's absolutely iterative, and it would take a few iterations before it makes it into the product. But of course, it would also take some iterations after it makes it into the product and get really that field response, that large scale test, if you will. So we try to do what we can to stack the deck for success when designing and building the feature, but really we don't often get everything right. And so absolutely correct. We try to collect several rounds of internal feedback, of client feedback during the development process, but continue that even after the feature is released for iterations and improvements. Absolutely.
What are some examples of changes you've worked on, additional pieces you've worked on that have made their way into the product and now are available for people?
I will share a few. And again, the caveat is it was never just me alone. It was a whole team, So I'll start with an example from Brainspace. We had recently released the Brain Explorer, a cool visualization to look behind the curtain, to look into the structure of the concept map, the concept brain build. The feature had been in development for a while. I had the pleasure of being part of the team when it went live, when we were finishing it up, putting that bow on it and releasing it. Since then, we had a lot of good feedback on that, a lot of excitement on that, but also several reactions in terms of tweaks around readability, around colors, and quite a few actually ideas of how to take it even to the next level. And by building even more connections and ability to almost take a screen recording of the path I took to it as a way to remember how I got to an exciting point. All of this tells our team that there is a real use case for it, and people are taking it to heart. And if they tell you how to make it better with real examples, they've tried it and they want to use it. So that's one example. Another example, there's many Reveal 11, but we'll let the excitement boil still
That's
some
right.
more. But another example was in the Reveal AI platform. We recently released a few months now a high precision classification. A very exciting feature, and I'll leave an expert like you define it better. But in that feature, there were quite a few iterations to get all the micro interactions of highlighting a specific sentence or a couple of words, marking it as being responsive to a particular cosmic group. And after a few of those steps, receiving in response highlights that the cosmic engine itself identified as likely high scoring under that same cosmic group. It sounds simple in terms of defining the steps, but by the time you have to do it in the software, there's a lot of refinement and tweaking that we needed to do. So it's been exciting to be part of that process, to see that labor of love really come to the market and start seeing some of the excitement about we've needed this for such a long time, or we've wanted to have that level of granularity when looking at a large contract and not wanting to put just one score on it, but really identify the pieces that made it responsive, highlight those parts. So two examples, there's many more, but these come to mind as recent and exciting, and things that have been in development for some time, made it to market. There's nothing happier for a director of product than seeing something go live.
Well, Billy, thank you very much for joining us. Bilyan Belchev is Director of Product AI Analytics at Reveal. I am George Socha. This has been eDiscovery Leaders Live, hosted by ACEDS and sponsored by Reveal. And once again, Billy, thanks so much.
Thank you so much for having me, George. My pleasure.